This is House Rule, a podcast about role-playing. My name is Crash.
No, you're Sean.
And this is episode 6. My name is Crash.
Okay, yes.
Still Sean.
Sean is
Fine,
here.
I'll keep my stupid name. I am.
I'm Ed.
This is Jeff.
I'm Lee.
And I'm Ebo.
Brian.
All right.
Not Crash.
Yeah.
Not Crash, not Brian.
Whatever.
All right, so we're going to start out with a little discussion on... We compiled a list of the top 10 things that annoy GMs by
We'll
our
talk about them
reckoning.
a little bit when we list them.
This list is all inclusive, and no arguments could ever be made about
It's
it.
true. Additionally, no arguments will be accepted about it unless you send us an email about it, in which case we will read it and then maybe talk about it.
For sure, we'll talk about it, yeah.
But we won't accept it.
All right.
yeah.
Yeah, so I am going to start going down this list pretty soon here, once I get it back.
Sorry.
We're just going to, explain what these are and why they stick in our craw.
Yes, craw. Excellent.
All right. So the first, number 10, we have group size issues. Pretty general about that one. Like,
Yeah.
is your group too big? Is your group too small? Are you adding or subtracting players when you don't want to be?
Okay, as a GM, I like to try to keep all the players engaged and paying attention. That is impossible to do with more than
5.
5.
I think 5 is the target
Yeah.
number for me.
I'll
5 or
say-
less is fine. 6 or more is less than 5.
Even the most on-track players, if you got more than 5, they are going to be starting up conversations, this, that, the other thing. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to work out.
It might be fine for a really casual game, but for a game of people who are there to roleplay, more than 5 is rough. The GM really has to keep on their toes, keeping people on track.
Yeah, Sean, we've talked about you and your gargantuan games in the past.
I used to love them. I don't love them so much anymore. I would almost say it depends on the system. And I guess the attitude. Back in 2nd edition and 3rd edition, it was like everyone was innocent and everyone was excited for this day to happen.
We also didn't know the rules, and that kind of helped.
It
I
did.
guess it did help.
Yeah. We have we're going to talk a little bit about cinematic game sort of effects later on, and that was, I think, a big part of it, was that it was sort of
An audience.
an entertainment kind of medium, different than a regular game. But yeah, I agree that it doesn't really work for me. It doesn't really seem to work anymore
Yeah.
in our group.
No, it doesn't.
So we're going to roll down to number 9, environment. This is an
Yeah.
annoying thing when you are uncomfortable in the surroundings where you're
When it's
running a
sweltering,
game.
when there's 4 people on a couch.
So it's been really hot lately, and we've been playing in very close, tight, personal spaces.
4 people on a couch sort of spaces. But only 3, but still, it's enough.
Yeah, it's a little bit
Yeah.
Stifling.
sultry.
This might be more annoying as a player than GM, but
Right.
when your players are uncomfortable, it's hard to keep people focused again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, another thing, in addition to environment, also room shape and size. One of our most infamous was
Oh, yeah.
the T. We had a friend who sat at a computer in front of his, or right next to his bed, in front of his dresser.
Sometimes he ran from the top bunk of
It
his
was-
bed.
it
I think
was-
it bears noting.
There was like a small hallway that led into the other portion of his room, which was blocked off by like another dresser. And eventually we sat on the sides and we could not see him.
Because it was shaped like a T, and
If
he
you
was at
had
the
more
end of
than
it.
2 or 3 players, or more than 2 players, or more than 3 players if they're all really good friends,
Yeah.
at least one person is effectively sitting in another room.
It's shaped like a capital
You have
T.
to lean around the corner. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm gonna. Yeah, no, you're not here.
An
Don't
easy
worry
way
about it.
an easy way to fix your room shape difficulties is to buy a couch shaped like an L. It's perfect.
I was gonna say also you could demolish your walls with a sledgehammer.
That's true.
We had this one location where we played in where it was like an oblong rectangle, and it was in a basement, and there was tons and tons of good furniture, and it was always the
2
perfect
L
temperature.
couches. 2 of them.
It was the most beautiful, epic place ever, and we
2
don't
L
have
couches.
access to the place anymore.
Dude,
Doug's
Doug's
house,
house.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about my parents' house.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
like,
how it is,
they would
man.
probably let us hang out there if we wanted to. I don't know.
That
I
wouldn't
haven't
be
had to
that
ask them.
weird. Yeah, it would. It would be
A
pretty
little weird.
So what's the next one on the list?
All right. One more thing I wanted to say about environment. We
course.
talked about technical problems.
Oh, yeah.
I sort of folded that into environment. Like anytime you, first of all, if you're like changing your play location, you have one technical problem is forgetting to bring stuff.
Yep.
If you or another player who has the stuff at their residence forgets to bring it, you're like, 1 or more character sheets is missing. Somebody doesn't have dice.
No one brings dice. No one brings pencil. Someone forgot to get a ride. Now we need to go get them.
No character sheets. If
character
you're
sheets
if you're
are
using a battle style board, as we've talked
yeah.
about earlier, and you forget to bring markers or the board or something to
let's
note.
draw a terrain with yarn or
Oops,
something.
I
I
don't
don't know.
My monster manuals is a
Computer
problem.
crashes.
Okay, we're gonna roll down to 8. Like mechanics or complicated book layouts. I was just anything that keeps your face in the book while you're trying to run a game.
I think
Also, a
is
limited
annoying.
number of books.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Well,
No.
I mean, like I would call it a book layout if you have to like index which book the things you're looking for.
I think
are
the
in.
greatest offender for that is late in its life cycle. 3.5 had 1 million books, but at the same time, World of Darkness has the worst laid out books that I think I've ever encountered.
Right now, 4th edition is pretty bad.
It's not great.
The book count is
they're
getting
all,
up.
They're all
is
set up
getting
in
so
the,
high though.
They're all set up in the same manner, so at least I know what I'm looking for in every book.
Yeah, but you need like 6 of them.
Yeah, that's true.
I've in 4th edition games we played, I know I have been searching for which book I need because it's like, particularly for like gear, you have 2 adventurous vaults and then
Yeah.
the player's handbook, and every other book has a smattering of a gear in it, and it's just like, I don't remember where this is.
I will agree with you though. White Wolf sets up all of their books like dong.
Yeah, and not all their books have a table or have an index in the back, and that just makes me want to shoot
I don't
somebody.
find the New World of Darkness to be that bad.
There's so much fluff in those books
The
that
problem-
it makes looking for the crunch that you need just a pain in the ass.
I
hate
owned
it.
a vast library of older World of Darkness books, and their big problem was that they would explain rules content in fluff content, and you would have to essentially read an entire short story every time you wanted to remember how.
I don't remember.
It has gotten
mechanic works.
better.
It has gotten better. It still isn't great, but again, I think those games are rules light enough that if you don't know what you need going into it, you should maybe
Make it up on the fly.
make it up on the fly, or else just read the book again
Yeah.
before you run. Okay,
Next.
rolling down. Next is scheduling.
Oh, boy.
no!
Okay, I think the number one offender on this is games where every single player has to be there every time.
Yep, definitely.
Because it is hell to
And
schedule a game like
most
that.
games ought to be like that. I mean, we have some games that are fairly, loosey goosey.
Yeah.
We have had anyway, but it's like, a lot of people are like, don't know what to do if somebody's not there, and well, a lot of games are like that where it's like every player character has a role, and if one of their roles isn't being filled, then the story can't really move.
Yep, and that's a big problem for 4th edition or any game where you need a cleric.
Oh yeah.
It's less of a problem for storytelling style games like World of Darkness and that sort of thing, but at the same time you want those characters there because they would be interested in whatever's happening. It's also a big problem if you're missing out on a player type. Like, if you're missing the player who usually keeps your sessions going sort of thing, you can really get stuck in a part of your session that you never meant to be stuck in.
It's also, we have our friend and gaming partner, Joe, and if we tried to run a game where he was there every single time, every time, it would not work out. And he's very open about that fact, so it ends up not being
He
annoying.
lives a little farther afield than the rest of us, so
Yeah.
it takes him like an hour to get here. And yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say like the biggest problem is like you have one player who would have made a certain choice that would have affected the story, but that player's not there, and so when he's back, he has no buy-in to whatever's going on because it's like I definitely would not have agreed to help the town mayor with this bizarre quest. I don't want to be here at all. That would also go on my list of player gripes because I can think of at least one example. The only example I have of when that happened was I was a player and I was like, "Oh no, this game is ruined for me."
Well, and you
because
can-
I was absent.
It sucks as a GM when you can tell that a player, since they've either not been there or because any of the other reasons we talked about,
Yeah.
the player doesn't care about what's going on, so they just start doing other crap.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
And then we get into unexpected player decisions if you listen to our last podcast.
Yeah. Next on our list is rules Nazis or setting Nazis is the sub.
We just don't like Nazis.
Basically, people who are inappropriately vehement about the exact
Yeah.
ruling of things.
I think setting Nazis is worse, but yeah, go ahead.
Either
Okay.
one is obnoxious when they're just being disrespectful of the GM.
Right. I mean, that's why it is an annoying thing for the GM is
Like,
because
if the GM makes a call, a judgment
Yeah.
call, because they don't want to look it up in a book or something like that, and your players don't just roll with it, like if somebody's like, no, wait, it slows down the session, that sort of thing, And it's obnoxious.
If it's common knowledge, it's fun to laugh at the GM. Oh, you're such an idiot. But if it's not common knowledge and you're going into it and you're either bringing in real world facts that most normal people have no reason to know, or you're bringing facts about the setting that that the GM obviously doesn't know, and you're trying to hold them to it, the player's just being kind of a dick.
Right.
We
don't play in a lot of published campaign settings except for games that take place in a real-ish modern world. And it's like, well, you can go on the internet and buy the ingredients for napalm, so I'm going to make napalm for my character. It's like, yeah, okay, but you're not going to be able to do that in the time allotted or something. And they're like, but no, I could, because I have this website that I know where I can get napalm ingredients overnighted to my house. Like, well, yeah, but I already said you can't.
And they're not trying to necessarily get an advantage for their character as much as they're just trying to be like, hey, look what I know, and that's just kind of dumb and annoying.
Right.
Going back to the idea of a player being a rules Nazi, one of the things that bugs me as a GM is when, as a player, it comes up to me, I know that this is how, say, grappling works in D&D, and those are some big rules with a lot of guessing. If the GM calls something else as a player, I know I'm going to sit there and take it and not be bothered with it. And as a GM, to watch a player argue with me, knowing that they would hate it as a GM, that's what makes this one of the higher up ones for me. I know I would be responding much more mature than they would, and I know they can. They just are not, and we should stop.
Well, in mid session is just not the time for rules debates. I mean, the GM can just be like, hey, this is how it works, at least for now, and move on. It's.
The next one on our list, I wrote on player flip-flopping. Basically, this is one that Sean brought up, basically, like when a player acts one way about like a plot element, and then later, when the player acts interested, and then later they're just not.
I love ad-libbing. When I plan out a game, I am actually a Nazi about the way I do it, but once it starts up, I can't wait to change it. I don't know why that happens to me. And so when a player goes to NPC or something, or they talk about NPC that I never thought about them wanting to do, I can be sitting there in my little chair talking and coming up with this huge plot and becoming passionate about something that I thought of 10 minutes ago, and I go with it, and then I put the player on the spot, and they're like, what are you talking about? Well, I'll say, well, you told this guy you wanted to meet up with him. He'll go, oh, yeah, I'll go there. And suddenly the interest, the relationship between the two characters is so
just kind of flattens out.
Yeah, because I suddenly got into it, and
it's like, oh, I heard you wanted to talk to me.
It's like a shift of responsibility. Either then the GM has to drive this plot line that they weren't interested in the first place, or another player ends up having to pick it up.
And it's like a play. The actors feed off of each other, and if the person's not into it, then I'm feeding off of nothing, and I just can't wait to end it to get to the next.
Yeah.
And you just start killing people. Next one.
Okay, I actually, since we have like an 11th thing that got tacked on at the end, so I'm going to fold this in with player flip-flopping because it's similar, but it's more of a mechanical take on it. We have a syndrome we call the Phantom Cheater.
Oh, Phantom Cheater.
Which is...
and we can start naming names, by the way.
Which is... Joe, our aforementioned gaming partner.
He's adorable.
He's got this thing that we invented for him called the Phantom Cheater, which essentially is when, like, let's say one of us, he's gone, but one of us wants to play his character in combat. We can't because his character sheet is written in, like, ancient Greek algebra, and we don't know what he's talking about. And so
the algebra is the worst because he's using letters.
He writes his stuff down like the book says, or like he thinks the book is saying, and he just will wind up with these absurd things. He's not trying to cheat. It's just his numbers don't add up for some reason.
And I think okay, my theory has always been this. Joe does not try very hard to learn the rules. But he thinks he kind of knows them, so that when he makes decisions and writes them down, he doesn't think about it very much. And when he looks back at it later, he's like, I don't remember what I was doing.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of things. I think one thing, and I do this to a degree, but it's like he has some things written on his character sheet and some things he just remembers. Yeah. And then the next session, he sure doesn't remember why he was thinking that.
He puts stuff in places it doesn't belong.
Yes.
He will put the math for his combat attacks in, like, his spell slot or his magical equipment slot. There will be there'll be, like, +5 to attack with this weapon, and there will be no mention of a magical weapon.
Yeah. And another subset of that, of the Phantom Cheater syndrome,
third subset,
is when players do their math after the fact. Yeah. You're like, oh, +1 from Bard music. oh, and +1 damage because I'm using a point blank shot. And it's just like, we've been trying to be a little more assertive about this, but it's like, basically we've come up with anything goes until the next person's turn is underway, and it's like, you can say 5 damage, 6 damage. The best one of these is like, players meaning well will be like, does a 21 hit? Does a 22 hit? 23? And it's just like, I'm trying to nail down the AC
Yes,
really
damn it,
well.
I just told him the AC.
And I honestly don't mind the Phantom Cheater thing as I'm a GM, because it's like,
Phantom
if
Cheaters-
they get a little bit of a bonus and they're not doing it on purpose, that's okay. I want them to win.
Phantom Cheater is kind of innocuous.
One of the things that we actually did last night was I completely forgot, since we went back to Pathfinder, so like probably 10 sessions now, that
Oh yeah, this was
We
awesome.
call it the diagonal demon.
every second square
Moves diagonally.
you moved diagonally, it costs an extra
5 feet
square
of
of movement.
Yep.
Has anybody actually read the Pathfinder movement rules to see if that's still in there?
No, I just
Because
assumed it
we've
was.
just been assuming it's the
Yeah,
same
we've
as
been
3.5.
I have been assuming that it was.
That book is too
4th
big.
edition, so.
You gotta assume.
Yeah, I guess the only reason I would say this is an irritating thing as a GM is mainly the last part where it's like when a player tries to shoehorn something in later, and more so than that, it's like you want to be assertive about it, but if the player forgot, like, it's not like a point of damage. I'm thinking like effects, like, oh well,
I forgot poison.
he's insubstantial. You can't really hit him, but I just told him that it was okay and that he took damage.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't want to take that back.
Oh, no. I got something about this that actually annoys me as a GM, and I don't know if this is in
Yeah.
a different category, but when they do something to my stuff and then expect me to remember it and get pissed when I forget, that is not my responsibility. I got too many things to think about.
Yeah,
while I'm
all right.
GMing.
In 4th edition happened a lot with the, did he save against fire, did he take fire damage?
Yeah,
and you
Dave's
constantly
stunned.
remind
I'm
me,
going fire.
that's-
I'm going
You're
poison.
like, no,
I'm
he
going
can't
away.
hit me. That monster was stunned. You didn't tell me. That was 5 minutes ago.
All right,
What's
we're
the
gonna
next one? We've
move
been on
on.
this one a while.
One-man show situations. Basically, anytime when one player is doing it all.
Yep.
It makes you feel like crap because you realize that there's one guy who's in it to win it, and you want everyone to be in it to win it.
Right.
Yep, and it can come up from a lot of ways, like where only one guy is trying really hard to keep the plot going or keep things interesting, or on the flip side of that,
Right.
where one guy is hogging all of the glory. Those are both one man show situations that are annoying for the GM. I think.
Yeah, it can either be everyone but the one person is not being assertive,
Yep.
or the one guy is a hog.
Which
Yeah,
sucks a lot for the other assertive players too.
Pretty concise point. We're gonna move right on to number 3. Ad-libbing or your own personal oversights.
Yep.
Situations where you as a GM aren't prepared. We wanted to put at least one on here where the GM's fault.
No.
He's only the only one to blame for his own
This
annoyance.
has happened to me a lot because I specifically have
Yeah.
run a game, and I'm running a game now where I ad-lib basically everything except like base setting stuff. And when I originally ran this game the first time, I never kept like a notepad or sheet of paper for me to write down the things that I'd made up, which is a tremendous error. If you're going to run a game, no matter what, you should have something to write down either on your computer or in front of you, where you can write down the stuff that you made up on the fly, so you don't forget
Right.
it later. And then because the players are going to remember, they're going to be like, "Oh, I remember this guy," and you're like, "What guy? I don't know who you're talking about."
And then they're like, "Oh no, that guy, he did this, and this. What was his name?" And you're like,
Are you sure
It
this
started
was
with an
my
F.
name this
I don't
time?
know.
What happens too often in our games is, what was his name? He told you his name.
And then no one
You
worries
can
about
reference
it.
him by
That
name
blacksmith.
to other NPCs if you'd like to.
Yeah, one of the things
I'll
that
give him the
you,
blacksmith's name.
you know his phone number. You know his address. I'm not making up these numbers.
Okay, first of all, if you make up phone numbers, you are going all the way in this game.
What were you going to say?
it doesn't matter.
Okay. Next little tidbit is disrespect, or we put down insubordination, but that is only if you consider your GM to be your
And there's
boss.
a lot of things you can list for something like that.
Yes. So, yeah, keeping it brief. Pretty much, this sort of goes along with the rule Nazis and setting Nazis, but there's a lot more to it. Like if your players are just trying to get around what you're trying to decide, or basically if they're trying to sidestep your rules or
Go outside
Yeah.
of go outside the boundaries you've made just to be.
Actually, this is my number one. I guess one of the main things is when a person is completely apathetic about what you are trying to do with your game, and they don't care. They either, if you want it to be a dungeon crawl, they're not going to the dungeon. They're just kind of screwing off around town, not doing anything with that. Or if you want to be a story-driven game, or you want this specific part of your story to be, really important, they're like, we haven't done combat in like forever, so let's do that instead, or something like that.
Really is the worst because first of all, it demonstrates to you that at least one of your players is really bored and not having fun with your game, and then they express that by wrecking the rest of the game.
Yep.
So
And it
you're like,
sucks.
oh, good. So nobody's going to be playing.
And then you're stuck asking yourself for the rest of the session, why did I invite this guy? What a jerk.
And what do we do now?
There
Yeah.
has to be a happy medium between ad-libbing, as in going off from the main trail, and helping the GM out, doing what he wants, but you don't have to do it in a straight line.
As a person who's run a lot of games and played in a lot of games, I want to say that you should never put your players on rails, even if it's going to be useful for the story. But as a player, you should try to
Work with the GM a little bit.
you should try to follow the two lines in the sand that might hint at rails if you think that the game isn't going to go anywhere if you don't.
Yeah.
You should follow the lead. You shouldn't ride the rail, I guess is basically what
Well,
I'm saying.
it depends on the type of game too, because the
Yeah, you
players.
should have some kind of candor about
If
what
the
type
players are supposed to be creating the rails, then
Right.
you gotta do what you gotta do.
And the last one that we have on the list, it incorporates a lot of different things, but the basic crux of it is players who fall asleep.
All right, so I want to segue this from the previous one because I realized this one was next. I didn't bring it up. A clear way to disrespect a game is to do things like falling asleep. The absolute worst, the worst offender is working on your game while playing in someone else's game. That is the most horrible one. The next one I've seen is listening to something like an iPod, playing games, be it PSP or other book-based games, reading books, other stuff like that. There are lots of ways
puzzles,
to
I get it.
yes, there are lots of
We have a
ways to
book-based game right here.
be very forward about saying, I don't care about what's going on. I'm disrespecting this game. I'm disrespecting everyone who's trying. So yeah, disrespect sleeping players. That's my bitch there.
Yep.
Yeah, we have. I would say honestly, the heart of the matter is sleeping players is probably the least of those offenders because
It's the hardest to blame them for.
Well, you're tired.
Yeah.
I mean, you can try really hard to stay awake, and I think that it's might be a symptom of the schedule we're trying to keep versus the schedule that we deserve to be keeping. We're sort of trying to play roughly the same hours that we played like 5 years ago and keep up that pace, and it's not really working for us necessarily anymore, but still it's one of those things like if you can't keep awake at all, maybe, I don't know,
Go home.
Well, or
You can excuse
maybe
yourself.
it's time for the session to just
Yeah.
come
maybe
to an
you
end.
need maybe a little snack would pep you up.
Joe fell asleep
Cup of
like
coffee.
an hour and a half into my game yesterday.
Yeah, but
I had to punch him.
he bring it back.
He brought
He
it
did
back.
bring it back,
I
yeah.
was very surprised and pleased that he fully recovered from that bout of
I was
narcolepsy.
too.
Yeah, we have various categories of sleepers.
I mean, long drives can do that to you too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that is the complete top 10 list. Some of us have basically said which ones are our top offenders. Is there anybody else who'd like to remark about?
No. I think number one really nailed it for me.
Yeah, we more or less
Yep.
ordered them based on a general consensus. But
I could name a different number one for me.
what was that?
The ad-libbing issue. As a GM,
Sean hates himself.
my most recent game, I used to go by a way of I will plant things in the game, and when then players come crawling and finding them, the show opens up. And I decided to change it so that I would try not to force anyone to go anywhere, and let's see if they can find what they're supposed to find. And it didn't happen the way it was. And everything that I had planned became unimportant, and what happened is I started ad-libbing and deleting essentially everything I had planned, facts that happened in the past. And my rule of thumb is once you say it to a player, it is hardcore. So once I say it in an ad-lib, I say, this guy is on your side. He now has to be a liar for the fact to remain that he's actually an enemy. And it gets so mixed up that I spend more time. I run an 8-hour game, and I will literally spend more time per day than in that one session trying to fix everything. And it makes me feel like my own game is now worthless.
Like out of control, just tangled out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's it for our top 10 list little segment here. Maybe we'll have more of these lists in the future, depending on how people like them.
All right. And I guess the other thing we wanted to talk about, or I guess the next thing, was using cinematics in games.
Or running it just a cinematic style game. Now, we've talked about several times in the show before that we run games of a different sort that are, sort of like video game style games or anime style games, but like epic storyline sort of things, and we all do it.
Well, honestly, I find that I'm getting kind of excited by the trend toward running more traditional games lately.
Yeah.
But we do have a foundation of a certain type of game with a certain sort of feel that I would describe as cinematic. Mm-hmm. Pretty standard.
Like the game where the players are of the utmost importance. The world for the most part revolves around them in a more meaningful way than it does in most games.
I guess I can identify in my mind a very clear time where this turned from, I would say, being kind of a thing that kind of happened to being really solidified, and that was the point where Sean, when he was running a game, I think it was called Lanta 2, where he started being just totally upfront about telling us where the camera is, so we can picture things.
Yeah, that's true. I did start saying that.
And
the camera.
That was awesome.
I can. So.
Medieval camera. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
Are you guys gonna edit this thing?
Go ahead.
Mind if I tell? Because it's gonna be a long story.
Go ahead.
All right. So I first started role playing when I was 13 years old with my friend, and it was fun to roll up a character, and it was boring. Role playing is always role playing has always been boring my entire life. I can't really explain why. I have some kind of attention problem. It's not ADD or ADHD. I'm not like that.
I'm sure it's one of those.
But he asked me to try GMing because he could tell I wasn't having any fun. So I started GMing, and I would listen to the soundtrack to Ransom, and it would completely drive the direction my game would be in. And what was happening was I would basically have, I don't know if this is the correct term or not, but it was illusions of grandeur, and I would just sit there and I would just picture what's going on as if it were a movie, and it was the main draw. And essentially all of my games, the reasons for why they're even happening is for a big scene or several big scenes. It really makes the players meaningless. It really does. But it was the main draw of my games. And I would use this to do all kinds of things. Like I would get through school just by picturing it, or I would exercise by only ever just imagining movie shots, and I would apply the movie shots to my game. And so that for like 3 months, I would picture the one same scene over and over again. And then when it came time to perform it, it would just be, I wouldn't let a player move. They had to sit there. And I mean, I used to try to run a game with Ed once, and he was there, and I would not talk about the players. I would only talk about the upcoming future scenes.
You guys remember the no action bubble?
Yeah. I had this.
Honestly, I liked it. I liked the cinematic stuff. I had a lot of fun in all of those games.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, I gotta say, we talked a little bit about things that kill games in the past, and I find that when I try to approach planning a game that way, it always winds up with I get bored before the big scene happens.
And then the game becomes roadkill. On the side of the,
it's true. That's like I had that exact same thing, and I think it's probably in no small part inspired by games that you ran where those big climactic events came together.
Set-piece moments.
Yeah, and I was just like, yeah, that's gonna be so awesome. 5-10 sessions from now, and it's like 2-3 sessions into it, I'm like, I don't know what's happening. This is so dull. But yeah, no, I know what you mean, and for my part as a player, I never had a problem with it. It was pretty sweet.
Yeah, I think you should just be running those sorts of games.
Seriously. Well, we all knew about it, And that's one of the things we kept talking about is communication. Like nowadays, we're trying a lot of different things with role-playing games, like player-driven, sort of sandbox and stuff. But I don't think all games need to be like that. If we know ahead of time that this game is about a story on rails and there's cinematics and this, that, and everything, I think everyone would be up for it and everyone would engage it.
Yeah, people would engage. People would approach these sessions in a completely different way, and I think that's cool as long as you're, as long as your group is open to it and you're talking about this sort of stuff, you can, honestly approach them ahead of time. And I mean, we've said this dozens of times on our previous podcast too, but like as long as you're honest with the players, your game it's much easier to keep your game going in the direction that you want it.
Well, and I think a variety is an advantage, not a disadvantage.
Yeah.
In almost everything, but it's like we can have all kinds of different games and enjoy all of them, even though they're different. There isn't one best type of game.
Yeah, although the games I run are the best.
But honestly, the
types of games.
cinematic style games were always really fun.
Yeah, they were.
And I think the big key in my mind to making that work is making sure that you're very clear about what is going to be happening in between, like cinematic moments. What exactly is the player's role in the cinematic moments, if any? And especially, like, the players need to have some buy-in for their character, and if that isn't, like, deeply tied to every time one of these big stingers comes up, you're going to have something for that character to latch onto.
Yeah.
Sean, I'm calling you out on this, and I never knew how this worked. Sean ran a game where, and I think this was in Lanta 3, where he had this huge cutscene. It was epic. And there was this character that it was like a Kane type of character. Like maybe they were good, maybe they were bad. We don't know. They're a little bit of both. And it came down to the point where Lee's character, at the end of this big cutscene, had a choice to kill him or not kill him. And basically Sean let Lee decide in the cutscene. Lee did it, saved the guy's life, and then Sean just went on with his cutscene. How did you know what was going to happen? Yeah.
That was one of the coolest things in the world because he had to choose to let him to live.
God, that was
character
so
appeared
epic.
elsewhere.
What would you have done if he chose dead? If he chose to kill him?
Was the coolest thing in the world. Okay.
I was really torn about whether to kill him or not, by the way.
Like, did you have a contingency for
when you guys
that?
fought the weapons, same session?
Yes.
And
I
100
believe so.
archers?
I believe yes.
Yeah. Tell us about this.
All right, no,
Sean
yeah.
doesn't remember.
All right, I guess. Okay, so let's say you give the players an option to kill an NPC. Like I said, I love ad-libbing. If I can set up a session, I
Like,
don't
did you
know.
plan for him living and figure you'd figure it out if you killed him?
No,
Or
no,
what?
no. I was expecting him to let him live, and if he would have died, the campaign would have carried on because the next thing that happened was another NPC was scheduled to arrive, and I could postpone it if he lived, or I could bring him to the front if he died. But no, the reason why I would do something like that is I'm excited to have to then play Raven, who then now has to, understand that this guy he's been trying to kill, Lee's character, wants him alive, and I love acting, so at that point I was just going to be ad-libbing at that point. And that is so exciting when I plan ad-libbing. I don't know if that does make any sense or not.
The reason I want to bring up this specific situation is because we're talking about cinematics, and we've touched on it, but we haven't said it outright. The biggest disadvantage to cinematics is that the players don't really have much input. Mm-hmm. But this sort of maybe was like a middle ground that was almost perfect.
Yeah.
Like when, what game was it for the Wii or whatever that came out where they added in cinematics, but you get to like press a button when something comes
Resident
up.
Evil?
Is that Resident Evil?
Yeah.
I mean, every game has that now.
Yeah, that started. I'm pretty sure that was the
quick time
hallmark
events,
of God
yeah.
of War in the first.
But it was like
They have them
People that did it,
everywhere,
yeah.
every single game.
So it was like a cutscene, and there was just enough player input to make it just like really epic, because
Yeah.
that was a big decision of the game. At least I thought it was a big event in the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think that game was filled with interesting, like, cinematics, partly because it was, like, it was an Amnesiac PC plotline, but it was basically, like, you finding out about the player character, and every time one of those flashbacks occurred, we found out more about how his character had been a despicable villain, and it was just like, yeah, he's doing good stuff now, but it's just more and more difficult to like him.
Oh, thanks.
Like, oh wow, that was a fun genocide cutscene thing. Yeah, neat.
Yeah, that was actually a lot of fun for me because, my character was really conflicted about a lot of the things that happened during the game. And I mean, he turned out okay in the end, but I could imagine a dozen different ways that character could have turned suicidal or like megalomaniac, crazy person town. And I don't know. That was it was interesting. It was a lot different than some of the other cinematic games Sean's ran.
I don't think we've been able to really recreate character development on the level of that game with any of the other game types we've tried to run.
Yeah, and that's weird considering how normally the cinematic game types are. What do you call it? Player light.
Yeah.
To me, it's always seemed like, at least when I've been running, trying to recreate that just because I can't do it that well, and trying to find another way to do it.
I'd like to put in
it just hasn't worked out.
I think
a little aside. Sean also spent more time planning his games than anyone else has ever done. I'm pretty sure.
it's possible.
Well,
Like Sean told me one day. Like Sean also spent, like and the first time I ever noticed this is when one day before Sean's game, it was like 4 or 5 hours before Sean's game started. I was like, "Hey man, do you want to hang out and play some games?" He's like, "Yeah, I got like an hour, but I need to psych myself up for my game for a few hours." And I'm like, "For a few hours? Jeez, I'll psych myself up for a game for any hours."
One of the differences for me that came for the way I GM was I used to run at my house, and when I ran at my house, as soon as I woke up, my game was in my head, so I would sit down, set everything up, and I would sit there and plan everything out over and over and over and over again because I have absolutely no memory, so I have to try and memorize and stuff. And then once we started doing it at other people's house, I would somehow convince myself that it was when I got over to that house, then I could start working on it.
Yeah.
I don't really understand why that was, though.
I think one of the things about that game in its various incarnations that led to success in terms of character development is that we made our characters, and we had like character backgrounds, but in most cases the character backgrounds were mostly created by you with our input as to like, is this something that your character would never have done or would probably have done or maybe would have done?
Yeah,
And it's not, I'm not like, I like a game where you get to like deeply like I don't know, you get to basically decide what your character is about and what they've been through.
Invest your character in the world.
But I
before
really
you start.
like that way too, because it's like basically you don't get to decide all the circumstances of your entire life up to this point. And so it's like, maybe I would have fallen on these breaks and I would have had to kind of do with what life handed me.
Yeah, we're with the way that Sean did it and compared to the way that we do it now. A lot of the times we're invested in our characters a whole bunch if we make our own, and that doesn't help the GM out at all. And when the GM does it and they're invested because it's part of their world, it's just a completely different animal. It's like I get more interested in my character because Sean is doing cinematic things with my character, either
And I
for
think it's
any
like
reason.
it's similar to if you have like some kind of control over your character's like circumstances, like you decide you want your character to be a soldier, and so you decide stuff about the army. But it's like no matter what, even if you're not really feeling very creative, your character has definite roots, and it seems like in that game, in the more cinematic nature, every character has a major thing, has something going on. Even if you didn't think something up, every character has like a root in, and they're going to be connected to things that.
And maybe that's one of the things is that every time I start doing characters now, when I create my own, it's like, oh, I have this background for my character, but when we did it with Sean, it was like I knew how my character would act in situations, but he's the one who did all the.
There was
background
trust
stuff.
there.
Yeah.
You had trust that he would give you a background, and that's almost better. What I wanted to say,
is better.
It is because the GM is the person who makes it stick. You can have all of your masturbatory character background and traits and whatever you want to yourself.
What did you just say?
I'm just
Masturbatory,
saying.
it's a word.
I'm just saying. If the GM doesn't make it stick,
You're just jerking
a
off.
character
It's just for your enjoyment.
making all this crap about your character, the other players are not likely to respond to it in a meaningful way unless the GM makes it stick, and then you get character development. And in a game where it's like cinematic like that, where the GM's kind of planning out your stuff for you, you know you're going to get stuff that sticks, and you can kind of bounce off of that. Whereas if you're making it up, you have to trust the GM to make your stuff stick, and that is a lot harder to do.
I think my problem
harder
from
for the GM too.
It's a lot harder for the GM to do.
my problem from a GM standpoint with this is like I find that when I'm starting a new game, I always kind of slack off in that department. Like some players will come up with backgrounds that are really interesting and that they're really into, and I will incorporate those. And some players will just say like, "Well, my character's a private detective," and it's like, well, that's pretty interesting, but it's like, my character has had no notable experiences to this point, is what they're basically saying.
Yeah, playing a PI in the World of Darkness is the most generic possible thing.
I'm not saying that it has to be the most generic. Like you could be like, I'm a laser-powered space ninja. It's like, wow, that's really exciting. But who's your character? Why are you here? And it's like, unless the story revolves around the struggles and tribulations of the laser-powered space ninja brigade, then that character's going to be bored. And the character who's like, well, my character is a short order cook who fought in the war, and his ex-wife is involved with an agency that wants to ban his race from this space station. Well, okay, well that's kind of
and he's a gifted cleaver, dual-wielding cleaver machete action star.
And I guess the point that's
Be like,
bringing
oh,
this
he's
back
a ninja
together,
too, awesome.
the point that's bringing this back together with the cinematic games is in these games, the players' roles are always clearly defined, and they all always have some connection to the production that's being laid out.
The GM feedback comes first in these games, which means you always have it. Because it's like, if you are playing in sort of a sandboxy game, and you toss out something that you're trying to do with your character, and the GM never feeds that back, then it doesn't stick. Then it's not real. It doesn't matter that you ever did it, because no one cares. Whereas if the GM tosses that back, maybe adds something, makes a problem with it, stuff like that, then it's like, oh man, yeah, it's real. But in the cinematic games, the GM is giving you, hey, this is real, and the player has to deal with it.
Yeah.
And it's really fun.
It should be noted that I think all of us here have tried to run cinematic games, and I can only think of success stories on the Sean and Jeff front.
Matt, I never played with him, but you guys told me Matt did a really good job.
Yes,
absolutely.
those were good.
That was in high school, I think. Well, maybe even starting in like middle school, but yeah, he was always really good at that. Like, he would get you really into it. He would respect your choices a lot more than GMs I had at that point.
Yes.
And it was just like, do you think something's funny?
You would respect your choices more than that one GM.
Well, I was going to say, like, he was a really awesome GM.
You didn't want to sit on the Yoshi there, did you?
Unfortunately, he has since become an adult, and so we no longer get to see him or play games with him.
As an adult, he's into politics.
Anyway, but yeah, cool dude, but ran really good games that were really cinematic. Like, I could still tell you most of the details of some of the best scenes of these games. Like,
Yeah, Jeff ran some wicked
outstanding.
cinematic stuff back in the day, but
Didn't he
for the
and I
most part
like
now
that?
he's been doing experimental stuff lately.
It was very short-lived. That was a very short-lived section.
Yeah, but it worked out for you pretty well. I won't say like super great, but it worked out.
Yeah, it
It
was
was a
short-lived
nice-
enough to get Sean interested, and then I stopped doing it. And poor Sean, sorry about that.
What were we talking about? Sorry.
Nothing.
I don't know. I'm sure I've tried it. I'm pretty sure it didn't go very well because I'm not having any strong memories.
Oh man! All right, so we're taking off all the gloves.
Yay!
The gloves are gone.
There are no gloves here. All
I
we
didn't
have
even
is
bring
mics.
gloves.
I can sidetrack this. All right, so we did a Star Wars game. Ed ran it. Ed is the only one who runs Star Wars games.
That's true.
He's the only one who's ever seen the Star Wars movies.
That is not true.
True.
All right, so
Yeah,
we did this
continue.
game. We're like 11th level, maybe 9th, something like that. Me and Jeff are Jedis. Lee as an Ewok. Scoundrel? What the hell were you?
I was a soldier.
Yeah,
Soldier.
I let him be an Ewok with a gun.
All right,
and
so I got
regret
this.
it.
I got this.
Best character ever.
I had used Force Lightning twice in this
Yeah.
game, and I don't know if anyone was even present. All I know is I was trying to hide it from the other Jedi at that point. And we're sitting in like a Star Warsian apartment, and my mentor asks me if I want to join the dark side, and it's just me and him. And before I could answer, Ed had Jeff. I remember he rolled a d20 to sense the Force, and he failed or something like that.
Something like that,
I think
yeah.
like Lee sensed it or something like that. I don't know. So
I'm sure
the
that it was
service of
not
the Force,
me.
and they rushed to my aid, and so this is another thing where I got to choose the dark side or whatever. Anyways, we fought the guy. I died.
One
and
of the best battles in
I-
role-playing history.
and I did not care when I died, which is a big thing for me because in almost anything, when I die, it's hard for me to keep a straight face. So I died.
Like
but
yesterday.
yeah. I was psyched up for this, so I died, and I'm like, come on, you guys, take him. And they fought him, and they ended up beating him. And not that I'm dissing Jeff for this, but Jeff then just turned to Lee and said, did you have fun? And Lee said, yeah. So then we all had fun, and that was important to Jeff that we were all having a good time. And to me, for the cinematic scene, it doesn't matter if people who are not involved are having fun or not. I know that seems like a weird twist, but it was like, that was not the point. The point was that Ed was doing something for the plot, which makes it more important than going outside of the game to make it happy for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't want to brag, but yeah, that was my most successful cinematic scene,
That
I
was
think, in my
Ed's
entire
shining
career.
moment in GMing.
It's just like
He's
everything
tried.
got really dark and stressful, and then there was big fight. It was awesome.
Oh,
And
man,
honestly, as
I
much
was
as
a
Sean
space
has
laser
led on,
ninja
as much
Ewok.
as Sean has led on, that it was more important for the scene, and I'll concede that it was a really fun session.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yay me!
And I stuck with the light side.
And
You
You
Peter
did.
did.
died.
You were actually good until the end.
Well, thank you for joining us. I hope you got some insight from our top 10 list of GM nuisances.
Yeah, we finally got Sean on.
And
That's me.
Sean, our RPG amigo.
What did you call yourself? Crash?
No, that's not his name. Don't even just pretend it doesn't
Crash
happen.
Doctor.
We call him that in real life.
All right.
We call him Crash all the time, but I prefer to call him Sean here because we're really official, and it's on the internet. Things are
Every-
real when they're on the internet.
They are.
Speaking
We're-
of things that are on the
I
internet.
ran into a fire alarm while driving a forklift at work once. That's how I got my nickname, Crash.
Crash.
Nice. Speaking of things that are on the internet, our website, houserule.com, there you can listen to this podcast and also read some other stuff. We
Best
have
of all
forums there
websites.
if you want to communicate with us. Also, communication-wise, we have an email address, podcast@houserule.com. And we are looking forward to hearing some feedback, gang. So I will see you later.
All right.